What was the craziest scandal at your school? I was on my way to math class when my friend ran up to me and said, "Dude, I just saw your mom march into the office and slap Principal Martin in the face. What happened?" I dropped my textbook and sprinted down the hallway toward the main office, where a crowd was already gathering. And I could hear my mother screaming while Principal Martin was shouting back that she'd assaulted him and he was calling the police. When I pushed through the crowd, I saw my mother standing there, with her face bright red and her hands shaking while Principal Martin held a tissue to his bloody nose, and the secretary was on the phone calling for security. "Mom, what are you doing?" I asked, mortified as everyone had their phones out recording. "Your principal put hidden cameras in the girls' locker rooms," my mother announced loud enough for everyone to hear, and the entire crowd went silent. My embarrassment turned to horror. Principal Martin had been at every school event since I was a freshman, giving speeches about integrity and safety. His face went from angry to panicked. "That's a completely baseless accusation," he said. "My daughter's friend Sophia found one yesterday when she was changing for volleyball practice," my mother retorted, pulling out her phone. I felt sick because Sophia was my girlfriend. It was hidden behind the air vent, and when she told her parents, they called me because I work in IT and traced where the feed was going. "That's impossible," Principal Martin said, sweat forming on his forehead. "Our school doesn't have cameras in private areas." "These weren't school cameras," my mother said, showing her phone screen to the growing crowd of students and teachers. "These were tiny wireless cameras that connected to a private server, and guess whose office computer was the only device with access to that server?" The secretary stepped away from Principal Martin like he was radioactive, while teachers started backing toward the door. "Someone must have hacked my computer," Principal Martin said quickly. "I would never do something like that. I've been an educator for 20 years. When I accessed your server, I found your Amazon account still logged in with the purchase history showing you bought 12 micro cameras 6 months ago," my mother said, scrolling through her phone. 6 months meant he'd been watching students all school year, and my skin crawled thinking about every girl who changed for gym class having no idea they were being recorded. "You hacked into my computer?" Principal Martin shouted. "That's illegal! What's illegal is recording minors changing clothes," my mother shot back, and several teachers started shouting while trying to get students out of the office. The vice principal pushed through the crowd looking horrified. "Tell me this isn't true," she said. "I was just trying to monitor for vandalism and drug use," Principal Martin said, his voice cracking. "In the girls' locker room?" the vice principal asked. "By hiding cameras behind vents?" "I was trying to protect the students," Principal Martin said desperately. "You were watching children undress," my mother said, her voice deadly calm now. "And I know the real reason you placed those cameras." Everyone went quiet again, and I felt my legs go weak, because if secretly recording kids changing wasn't the reason, what could possibly be worse? "I traced the server to see who else had been accessing the feeds," my mother said, and Principal Martin's face went completely white. "You weren't just watching them yourself." "Mom, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "He's been selling access to the live streams," my mother said, holding up her phone showing chat logs. $50 a month for basic access, $200 for premium with recording capabilities, and these subscribers have usernames from all over the world. I threw up into the trash can by the secretary's desk, because the thought of strangers watching my girlfriend and classmates changing made me physically sick. And several other students were crying. The crowd erupted in chaos, and students started screaming while teachers tried to maintain order, but security guards had arrived and were trying to clear the office. "That's not true!" Principal Martin shouted, pure panic in his voice. "Someone else must have done this using my computer. Your PayPal account linked to the server has received over $30,000 in the last 6 months, my mother said, all from anonymous payments that match the subscription dates. $30,000 from selling videos of kids at my school, and I wanted to punch him myself, but I was shaking too hard. "You've been selling videos of our children?" the vice principal asked, looking like she was going to be sick. "How many perverts have been watching us?" A girl from my PE class screamed. "The police are already downloading everything from the server," my mother said. "There's one more thing," my mother added. She turned around to look at our gym teacher who was standing in the doorway, his face lighting up like a Christmas tree. "I've been waiting for this," he said, as he started approaching Principal Martin, before doing something none of us expected. He grabbed Principal Martin by the collar with both hands and slammed him hard against the wall next to the trophy case. The whole case shook, and several trophies fell over while everyone in the office gasped and backed away. "You knew!" the gym teacher shouted right in Martin's face. "Female staff kept telling me about weird stuff near the locker rooms, and you told me to ignore it." Martin tried to push him off, but the gym teacher was way stronger and kept him pinned against the wall. His grip was so tight that Martin's shirt collar was cutting into his neck, and his face was turning red. "You told me to keep quiet about the maintenance request for those vents," the gym teacher yelled even louder. Martin's face went from red to white in about 2 seconds, and he stopped struggling. Security guards rushed in and grabbed the gym teacher's arms, trying to pull him away from Martin. It took 3 guards to finally break his grip and drag him back while Martin slumped against the wall, gasping for air. The vice principal was shouting for everyone to calm down, but nobody was listening because students were screaming and pushing to see what was happening. More teachers arrived and started herding students out into the hallway, but everyone had their phones up recording everything. The gym teacher was still trying to get at Martin even with 3 guards holding him back. Police sirens suddenly filled the air and my stomach dropped even more than it already had. 2 police cars pulled up right in front of the school and officers jumped out running toward the building. They pushed through the crowd of students and entered the office with their hands on their weapons. One officer went straight to Martin, while another helped the guards control the gym teacher. More police cars arrived, and soon there were at least 6 officers in the office area. They started separating everyone and telling students to move back, while 2 officers headed toward Martin's office. One officer put yellow tape across Martin's office door, and another stood guard making sure nobody went near it. Detective Eric Gomez walked in wearing a suit and badge, and immediately took control of the situation. He pointed at groups of students and told them to leave the building right away. Teachers started moving everyone toward the exits while he approached my mother. "Ma'am, I need you to stay and show me everything you found," he said calmly. He turned to Martin, who was still against the wall looking sick. 2 officers approached Martin, and one started reading him his rights while students pressed against the windows to watch. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer said while pulling out handcuffs. Martin's hands were shaking, so bad the officer had trouble getting the cuffs on him. The crowd outside was getting bigger as more students came to see what was happening. I pulled out my phone and texted Sophia that the police were here and Martin had been arrested. She didn't text back and I kept checking my phone every few seconds, hoping she would respond. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type, and I felt like I might throw up again. The officers started walking Martin out of the office toward the police car. Hundreds of students had their phones out recording as he did the walk of shame past everyone. Some kids were crying and others were shouting angry things at him as he passed. They put him in the back of the police car, and I watched his head drop forward like he was trying to hide. Detective Gomez came over to me and my mom and asked us to come to the station. "We need formal statements from both of you," he said. Mom nodded, and we followed him to his unmarked car while other officers stayed to secure the scene. During the drive, Mom finally started explaining what had been happening for the past 2 weeks. She told me Sophia's parents had called her right after Sophia found the camera behind the vent. They knew Mom worked in IT and asked if she could trace where the camera feed was going. Mom spent days tracking the signal and following digital trails to find the server. She discovered it was hidden on the school network, but only accessible from Martin's computer. She found his Amazon purchase history still logged in, showing the camera purchases from 6 months ago. She also found the payment system he set up for selling access to the live streams. The whole time she was gathering evidence she couldn't tell anyone except the police. She had been working with detectives for a week, helping them build the case. They wanted to make sure they had everything documented before arresting him, so he couldn't destroy evidence. We arrived at the police station and Detective Gomez led us inside to an interview room. He told us Sophia and her parents were in another room giving their statements right then. I wanted to see her, but he said we had to stay separated during the investigation. He explained that because the videos had been sold to people in other states and countries, it was now federal. The FBI cybercrimes unit was already involved and agents were on their way to help. He asked me questions about Martin and if I'd ever noticed anything strange about him. I told him about how Martin was always at every school event taking pictures. He wrote everything down and asked if any other students had mentioned weird experiences. While we were talking, we heard shouting from the hallway outside the interview room. Tyler Rodriguez was crying and yelling while his parents tried to calm him down. "Ashlyn was changing in there every day," Tyler screamed through his tears. His sister Ashlyn was a sophomore on the swim team who used the locker room constantly. Tyler's dad was bright red and looked ready to kill someone as he paced the hallway. His mom was crying and holding Tyler while trying to keep his dad from doing something stupid. 2 officers had to physically block his dad from going toward the holding cells where Martin was. Detective Gomez excused himself to help calm the situation while we waited in the interview room. When he came back, he told us more families were arriving as word spread about the arrests. He said the FBI had already started tracing the IP addresses of everyone who bought access. Mom pulled out her laptop and showed him the documentation she had gathered over 2 weeks. She had screenshots of chat logs and payment records and IP addresses from over 30 countries. The detective's eyes got wide as he scrolled through page after page of evidence. He called in another detective, and they both started going through everything Mom had collected. They said this was one of the biggest cases of this type they'd ever seen. Mom hadn't slept in 48 hours, but refused to rest until every bit of data was preserved. Later that night, our house became like a command center with forensics people everywhere. They set up computers in our living room, and Mom worked with them, organizing all the evidence. FBI agents arrived and started copying everything from Mom's laptop to their secure servers. They worked through the night, making sure nothing would be lost or corrupted. Mom showed them back doors into Martin's server that he didn't even know existed. She had found ways to recover deleted files and chat logs he thought were gone forever. The agents kept saying how lucky they were that Mom had found everything before Martin could destroy it. The next morning, I barely slept and got to the school early to find the parking lot packed with police cars and news vans. The superintendent stood at the front entrance, directing everyone to the auditorium for an emergency assembly, while security guards checked student IDs at every door. I found a seat in the back as hundreds of students filed in, looking confused and scared. The superintendent took the microphone and told everyone that Principal Martin had been arrested for placing hidden cameras in the girls' locker rooms and selling access to the footage online. Half the auditorium started crying, and several girls ran out through the side doors with their hands over their faces. She promised the district would cooperate fully with law enforcement and bring in extra counselors to help students process what happened. April Stevens, our school counselor, was already setting up a crisis support center in the library with folding tables and boxes of tissues. Within an hour, the line of students waiting to talk stretched down the hallway and around the corner. They had to call in counselors from 3 other schools just to handle everyone who needed help. I walked past the library and saw kids sitting in circles crying while counselors handed out water bottles and tried to keep everyone calm. Outside the main entrance, Chuck Hodges from Channel 7 News had set up his camera and was trying to grab students for interviews as they left the building. Parents started showing up and formed a human wall, blocking him from getting near any kids. The school went into modified lockdown with nobody allowed in except students, staff, and parents with proper ID. Chuck kept shouting questions at people, but the parents stood shoulder to shoulder refusing to let him through. My phone buzzed and I saw Sophia had finally texted me back after being silent since yesterday. Just 3 words that made my stomach drop. I feel dirty. I texted back asking if I could see her or if she wanted to talk, but she replied that she needed time alone to process everything. I understood, but it hurt knowing she was going through this, and I couldn't help her. The FBI tech specialist arrived that afternoon in a black SUV and went straight to the main office with 2 other agents carrying computer equipment. They spent hours going through Mom's evidence, and the specialist confirmed everything she had found, plus discovered something worse. Martin hadn't just been selling basic access, but had been offering premium packages where subscribers could request specific girls or specific angles. Several students threw up when word spread about what that meant, and more parents showed up to pull their kids out of school immediately. Brody Nichols found me at my locker and told me his mom was on the school board and had known about previous complaints against Martin. She had dismissed them as disgruntled employee gossip and never investigated further. Now the board was facing serious questions about what else they had ignored or covered up over the years. 3 more girls came forward that day, saying they had noticed their gym clothes moved around in their lockers or items going missing. One girl said her sports bra disappeared twice, and she thought she was just being forgetful. The investigation expanded as detectives realized the cameras might have been just one part of what Martin had been doing. They started interviewing every female student who had PE or used the locker rooms in the past year. 2 days later, the news showed Martin's wife outside the courthouse filing for divorce and a restraining order against him. She told reporters she had no idea what her husband had been doing and was horrified to learn the truth. Their teenage daughter had already transferred to another district, and I felt terrible for her having to deal with this. Nobody deserved to have their dad turn out to be a monster who hurt kids. Dallas Curry, this expensive defense lawyer Martin hired, held a press conference on the courthouse steps, claiming Martin had mental health issues and needed treatment, not prison. The victim families who were watching erupted in anger, with one mom screaming that it was disgusting excuse-making for a predator. Ashlyn's mom was crying and yelling that her daughter had tried to hurt herself because of what Martin did. Detective Gomez called Mom that evening with more bad news about the investigation. He had discovered Martin used school funds to buy the cameras by claiming they were for security equipment on the purchase orders. The Financial Crimes Unit was joining the investigation to add embezzlement charges on top of everything else. Martin had stolen money meant for textbooks and computers to buy cameras to spy on kids. The detective said with federal charges for distributing across state lines, plus the embezzlement, Martin was looking at spending the rest of his life in prison. Mom hung up the phone and just sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, while I made her eat something since she hadn't had a real meal in days. The whole town was talking about the scandal, and every day brought new horrible details about what Martin had done. Parents were organizing meetings to demand answers from the school board about how this could have happened for 6 months without anyone noticing. Students were walking around school like zombies, nobody could focus on classes, and teachers didn't even try to give real lessons. Everyone was just trying to get through each day, while the investigation kept expanding, and more victims kept coming forward with stories about Martin that made everyone sick. The school called an emergency parent meeting for that Thursday night, and the gym was packed with angry parents demanding answers about how this could happen for 6 months without anyone knowing. I sat in the back row with Mom while parents took turns screaming at the school board members who looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Alexa Pritchard stood up halfway through and announced she was organizing a lawsuit against the whole school district for failing to protect our kids. The room erupted, with some parents yelling that lawsuits would just hurt the school more, while others shouted that the district needed to pay for letting this happen. Parents started pushing and shoving each other while arguing about whether to sue or focus on healing, and the meeting ended with people literally screaming in each other's faces while security tried to break up fights. The next morning, our gym teacher got called into the office, and by lunch, everyone knew he'd been suspended pending investigation for not reporting his suspicions about Martin earlier. He pulled me aside after school looking defeated and told me he'd tried to document weird things he noticed, like Martin hanging around the girls' locker room. But when he brought it up to the vice principal, she threatened to fire him for spreading rumors about the principal. He showed me emails he'd saved where she told him to mind his own business unless he wanted to find himself looking for a new job. That same afternoon, Sophia's parents pulled up to the school, and I watched them pack her stuff from her locker into boxes while she stood there crying. She texted me later that night saying she couldn't handle being in the building where it happened, and her parents were starting homeschooling immediately. I told her I understood, but it felt like I was losing her when she needed support the most, and I didn't know how to help from a distance. 3 days later, the news announced that Assistant DA Michaela Brady was taking over the case and charging Martin with 47 counts, including production of child pornography. She held a press conference explaining that each count carried up to 20 years in prison, which meant Martin could get 940 years total and would definitely die behind bars. The school board met that weekend and decided to install new security cameras in all the hallways, but these were big visible ones that everyone could see. They also announced that every single staff member had to undergo new background checks immediately, even if they'd worked there for decades. Several teachers resigned in protest, saying they were being treated like criminals when they hadn't done anything wrong, and one teacher said it was insulting to be investigated just because Martin was a monster. Mom started getting phone calls at all hours with people breathing heavy or whispering threats, and one morning we found a brick through our front window with a note saying, "She ruined an innocent man's life." The police put a patrol car outside our house 24/7, but I couldn't sleep knowing there were people out there who wanted to hurt my mom for protecting kids. 2 weeks into the investigation, the FBI called a press conference announcing they'd arrested 3 of Martin's subscribers in other states. One was a middle school teacher in Texas, another was a youth baseball coach in Florida, and the third was a daycare worker in Ohio, which made parents nationwide start demanding better screening for anyone who worked with kids. The Texas teacher had been watching the feeds during his lunch breaks at his own school, and investigators were now checking if he had cameras in his school too. Tyler came to the school the next Monday with his knuckles all wrapped up, and I found out he'd beaten the crap out of some kid who made a joke about the cameras in front of him. He got suspended for 3 days, but nobody blamed him for snapping because his sister Ashlyn had tried to kill herself over the weekend and was in the ICU. She'd taken a whole bottle of her mom's pills and left a note saying she couldn't live knowing strangers had watched her change for gym class every day. Tyler's family was falling apart, and his dad had to take time off work to stay at the hospital while his mom wouldn't leave Ashlyn's bedside. Meanwhile, emails surfaced showing the school board president had told Martin to handle things quietly when concerns were first raised about him hanging around the locker rooms too much. The local news got hold of the emails where she literally wrote that they needed to avoid any scandal that might hurt the school's reputation or affect property values in the district. She resigned immediately, but 3 other board members were also in those email chains, and parents were demanding they step down too, with emergency elections scheduled for next month. Martin's preliminary hearing finally happened 3 weeks after his arrest, and the courtroom was packed with victims' families and reporters. The prosecutor revealed they'd traced Bitcoin payments now, and Martin had actually made over $50,000 total from selling access to watch our classmates. The judge reviewed all the evidence, including the camera purchase records, the server logs Mom had found, and testimonies from 12 different girls who'd been recorded. Martin sat there in his orange jumpsuit crying and shaking, while his lawyer tried to argue for bail, but the judge called him a clear danger to minors and denied it immediately. Martin completely broke down sobbing when the judge said he'd stay in jail until trial and had to be dragged out of the courtroom by guards while parents clapped. The next few weeks dragged by with everyone at the school walking around like zombies, and I kept checking my phone hoping Sophia would text me back, but she never did. Alexa organized a victim support meeting at the community center, and when I walked in, I saw Sophia sitting in the back row with her arms wrapped around herself looking at the floor. I tried to catch her eye, but she wouldn't look up, and when Alexa started talking about healing and moving forward, Sophia just stared at her hands folded in her lap. Other girls were crying and hugging each other, but Sophia sat there like a statue, and when the meeting ended, she got up fast and headed for the door. I followed her out calling her name, but she walked faster, and when I touched her shoulder, she pulled away and kept walking to her mom's car without saying a word. The IT specialist called Mom the next day, saying he'd found something huge on Martin's computer and needed her to come to the station right away. When she got back, she looked sick and told me Martin had been planning to help 2 other principals install cameras in their schools, and they'd already ordered the equipment. The FBI arrested both principals that same day and found cameras already installed in one school's locker room that had been recording for 2 weeks. Mom had to testify before the grand jury, and she was gone for 6 hours while I sat in the courthouse hallway, playing games on my phone, trying not to think about what they were asking her. She came out looking exhausted with dark circles under her eyes, but she grabbed my shoulders and said they had everything they needed to put Martin away for life. The next Monday, over 500 students walked out of class, demanding the rest of the school board resign for ignoring warnings about Martin. We marched to the district office chanting and holding signs while news crews filmed everything, and this time the adults actually listened instead of telling us to go back to class. 3 more board members announced they were stepping down by the end of the day, and the superintendent promised new safety rules would be in place within a week. That night, Martin's mother went on the news claiming my mom had hacked into her son's computer and planted all the evidence to frame him. Mom's lawyer sent her a letter the next morning, saying if she kept lying about us on TV, they'd sue her for everything she had. The gym teacher came back to work after investigators proved he'd tried to report Martin 3 times, but got threatened with losing his job each time. He stood in the hallway between classes with tears in his eyes, telling every girl who walked by that he was sorry he didn't do more to protect them. Some girls hugged him and said it wasn't his fault, but others just walked past without looking at him. I was eating lunch alone when my phone buzzed with a long text from Sophia that made my hands shake as I read it. She said she couldn't be with me anymore because every time she looked at me, she thought about what happened and she needed space to heal without any reminders of that day. I texted back that I understood and would wait as long as she needed, even if that meant forever, but she never responded. 3 months after everything started, Martin finally went to court and shocked everyone by pleading guilty to all charges to avoid going to trial. The judge gave him 35 years in federal prison, and victims didn't have to testify, which made some families happy, but others wanted their chance to face him in court. The school started making every teacher and staff member go to training about spotting predators and how to report concerns without fear of getting fired. They also brought in people to teach us students about body safety and speaking up if something felt wrong, even if it was a teacher or principal doing it. Tyler texted me that his family was moving to Colorado because Ashlyn had tried to kill herself again and needed special treatment at a place that dealt with trauma. He said she was getting better slowly, but they couldn't stay here, with all the memories and reminders everywhere they looked. The moving truck pulled up to their house on a Saturday, and I helped Tyler carry boxes while his mom cried, and his dad kept his jaw clenched tight. Tyler hugged me before getting in the car and said maybe we'd see each other again someday, but we both knew that probably wouldn't happen. Ashlyn waved at me from the back seat, looking thin and pale, but she managed a small smile, which was more than I'd seen from her in months. Chuck showed up at our house 2 weeks later with a big envelope and a weird look on his face, telling Mom he'd won some journalism award for his coverage of the Martin case. He stood in our doorway holding the check for $5,000 and said he was donating all of it to the victim support fund that Alexa had set up. Mom started crying and hugged him right there on our porch while I watched from the kitchen, thinking about how everyone hated him at first for putting our story on TV, but now families were thanking him. The same afternoon, Mom got 3 different phone calls from tech companies wanting to hire her after reading about how she'd caught Martin through his server. She paced around the living room talking to recruiters from companies I'd only seen in commercials, and they were offering her crazy money to help protect other schools. One company wanted her to fly out to California next week for an interview. Another said they'd double her current salary, and the third one offered to let her work from home designing safety systems for schools nationwide. She took the third job and spent the next month building software that could detect hidden cameras and suspicious network activity. I watched her work at her computer for hours every night, coding programs that would protect kids she'd never meet, turning our nightmare into something that might save others. The first Martin subscriber went to trial in Texas 3 weeks after Mom started her new job, and we watched the news coverage from our couch. The guy was some office worker who'd paid $200 a month for the premium access, and when they showed his face on TV, I felt sick all over again. The judge gave him 15 years, and he cried in court saying his life was ruined, but nobody felt bad for him. Some of the victims' families flew down to watch the trial and said seeing him get convicted helped a little, though others posted online that no amount of prison time could give them back what was stolen. Mom showed me the victim impact statements that got read in court, and we both cried reading about girls who couldn't change for gym anymore or dropped out of sports completely. Sophia texted me that night for the first time in weeks, just a short message saying she'd started seeing a therapist who specialized in this kind of trauma. She said the therapy was hard, but she was trying to work through everything, and sometimes she'd send me updates about small victories, like being able to walk past the gym without panicking. I wanted to text back more, but just said I was proud of her and thinking about her, which seemed to be what she needed. The school district announced the settlement amount at a packed board meeting where parents were screaming and crying. $3 million split between all the victims' families, which came out to about $75,000 per family after the lawyers took their cut. Some families said they were using it for therapy. Others were moving their daughters to private schools, and I heard Tyler's family was putting their share toward Ashlyn's treatment at that special place in Colorado. The state legislature passed new rules about background checks for school employees after our story made national news. They called it Sophia's Law, but used a fake name to protect her privacy, requiring every school worker to get rechecked every 2 years instead of just when they got hired. Mom testified at the hearing about how Martin had passed his initial background check 20 years ago, and nobody had looked since then. The conference for educators happened 6 months after everything started, and they asked me to speak about warning signs teachers should watch for. I stood at that podium with my voice shaking, looking out at hundreds of teachers and principals from across the state. I told them about how Martin gave speeches about integrity while hiding cameras, how he used his position to silence anyone who questioned him, and how the adults who were supposed to protect us had failed. My hands were sweating and I wanted to run off the stage, but I kept talking because maybe my story would help some teacher somewhere notice something wrong before kids got hurt. The gym teacher spoke right after me, telling everyone how he'd tried to report his concerns but got threatened with losing his job and his pension. He showed emails where administrators told him to stop spreading rumors or face termination, and several teachers in the audience started crying. He was working with lawmakers now to create protections for school employees who report suspicious behavior, testifying at the state capitol about how fear keeps people quiet when kids are in danger. Then, we got news that Martin had been attacked in federal prison by other inmates who found out what he'd done to kids. The guards found him beaten pretty bad in the shower area, and while part of me knew violence was wrong, I couldn't find any sympathy for him. Mom said she didn't feel bad either, and neither did anyone else we knew, because he destroyed so many lives for money. Mom and I started seeing a family therapist together to deal with everything that had happened, and the guilt she carried about not catching Martin sooner. The therapist was this older woman who kept reminding Mom that she'd saved countless future victims by exposing him when she did, but Mom still blamed herself for not knowing sooner. We went every Thursday afternoon and slowly started processing all the trauma and anger we'd been carrying around for months. The therapy helped, but life kept moving forward, and one Tuesday morning a filmmaker called our house asking if Mom would talk about what happened for a documentary. She listened to him explain how other schools had similar problems, but nobody knew the warning signs, and after thinking about it for a few days, she agreed to do it if they kept her face hidden. The film crew came to our house with cameras and lights, and Mom sat in shadow telling them everything about finding the cameras and tracing the feeds while I watched from the kitchen doorway. They interviewed other parents too, and the detective and even some teachers who said they wished they'd noticed something was wrong sooner. Summer ended, and when senior year started, I saw Sophia walking through the front doors of school for the first time since everything happened. She looked different with shorter hair and new clothes, but when we passed in the hallway between second and third period, she actually looked at me and nodded, which felt huge after months of silence. The new principal they hired was this younger woman who immediately started making changes, including putting up locked boxes where kids could drop anonymous notes about anything that worried them. Within the first month, 2 kids reported a teacher who was being weird with female students, and another reported drug dealing in the parking lot, and both problems got fixed fast. Detective Gomez showed up at our house one evening in October with good news about the investigation. He sat at our kitchen table showing Mom papers about 12 more arrests they'd made in different countries, including some guy in Germany who had thousands of videos from our school. Mom's work documenting everything had made it possible to track these people down and prosecute them when normally these cases fell apart from lack of evidence. Spring came, and graduation got closer, and the school asked Sophia if she wanted to speak at the ceremony, which surprised everyone since she'd barely been back a full year. She worked on that speech for weeks, and when graduation day came, she stood at the podium in her cap and gown, talking about surviving the worst thing imaginable. She never said Martin's name, but everyone knew what she meant when she talked about betrayal by people who were supposed to protect students and finding strength to keep going. People were crying, including teachers and parents, and when she finished, the whole gym stood up clapping for like 5 minutes straight. The next week, the school board voted to remove Martin's name from everything in the building, including the achievement wall and the trophy case where he'd won educator awards. They held this ceremony where they literally took down every plaque with his name, and the new principal gave a speech about the school belonging to students, not predators. The maintenance guys spent a whole day scraping his name off the parking spot sign and the conference room door, and anywhere else it appeared. Mom got invited to City Hall the following month, where the mayor gave her this Community Hero Award in front of news cameras and a big crowd. She tried to refuse it at first, but the mayor insisted, and when Mom accepted it, she said it really belonged to all the kids who survived and the people who believed them when they spoke up. I was working on college applications and decided to write my main essay about everything that happened and what it taught me about standing up when systems fail. The admissions counselor from state called our house personally to tell me it was one of the most powerful essays she'd ever read, and they wanted me in their criminal justice program. Around the same time, Sophia texted me for the first time in months just to say she'd gotten into college too and was going to study to become a victim's advocate. We weren't getting back together and would be at different schools 3 hours apart, but knowing we were both moving forward with our lives felt good. Then, in late July, we got the call we'd been waiting for when the FBI agent told us the last of Martin's subscribers had been convicted in federal court. This guy in Texas got 15 years, and with him done, all the criminal cases were finally closed, and the agent said our case had helped them develop new software to catch predators online. The whole thing had taken over a year from when Mom first slapped Martin to when the last creep went to prison, but at least it was finished and kids were safer because of what Mom did. A year after everything started, the school held this big healing ceremony in the gym where victims could share their stories if they wanted. The new principal set up chairs in a circle, and about 200 people showed up, including students and parents and teachers. Sophia stood up first, and her hands were shaking, but she talked about finding the camera and how it changed her life forever. 3 other girls spoke after her, and each story made people cry harder than the last one. The younger students in the audience looked shocked, but also more aware of what to watch for. Mom had been working nonstop since the trial ended, and her new safety protocols got picked up by 30 schools across the state. She showed me a folder full of letters from administrators, thanking her for helping protect their students. Each letter helped ease the guilt she carried about not catching Martin sooner, even though it wasn't her fault. I started college that fall and joined this group that worked on campus safety initiatives right away. During our first meeting, I told them about what happened at my high school, and everyone went quiet. The group leader said, "My experience gave me credibility that could help push for better protections and reporting systems." We spent weeks developing an anonymous reporting app that students could use if they felt unsafe. Winter break came, and there was this victim support conference downtown that Alexa had organized. I walked in and saw Sophia sitting at a table near the back, looking healthier than she had in months. She was actually laughing with another girl, and when she saw me, she waved me over. We got coffee from the lobby and talked for an hour about our futures and what we were studying. She was stronger now, and even though we weren't getting back together, it felt good to see her healing. That same week, Tyler messaged me out of nowhere with an update about his sister. Ashlyn had started community college and was doing way better after months of treatment. Their family found peace in a new city where nobody knew their story and could start fresh. He thanked me for being there during the darkest time when his family was falling apart. Mom got called to the state capitol the next month to meet with legislators about her detection software. They wanted to make it available free to all schools using state funding, which would protect millions of kids. The meeting lasted 3 hours, and when she came out, they'd agreed to fund the whole thing. Martin's evil had somehow led to protecting kids nationwide, which felt like the only good thing to come from all this pain. 2 years after Martin's arrest, the school held a memorial ceremony where survivors planted a garden behind the gym. They brought in all these trees and flowers, and each victim got to plant something if they wanted. Sophia helped plant the centerpiece tree, and seeing her smile while digging in the dirt showed how far we'd all come. The garden would grow bigger every year, just like the survivors were growing stronger from what they'd been through. I chose to study cybersecurity in college because of everything Mom had done to catch Martin and his subscribers. My professors knew about our case and sometimes asked me to speak to their classes about online safety. Every predator we learned to catch in our coursework felt like honoring what the victims at my school had survived. The trauma we endured had become purpose, and that purpose drove me to specialize in protecting kids online. Thanks for sticking with me through all my questions and wonderings. It's always so interesting exploring this stuff together. Until we meet again, take care. Subscribe for more content like this.